Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, a roundup of the first Grand Tour racing of the season. I'll be looking back at the first three stages of the Giro and the entirety of the Vuelta Femenina. Plus farm track fun, Tro-Bro Léon, and a blast from the past at Elfstedenronde Brugge. This week in the world of racing, we learned that there is something that Tadej Pogačar likes more than winning.
Tadej Pogačar, so how's the taste of this first Giro win? Is better than the pasta? You like that much?
No, pasta is way better. Sorry. Yeah. I could live without a Giro win, but I think I could not live without pasta probably. So. Yeah.
We also learnt that Arnaud Delis now has 21 pro wins and 17 of them becoming one-day races.
He's in the lead now. He's going to have to try and keep this going all the way to the line. Arnaud Delis been so unlucky recently, but he's going to win Tro-Bro Léon, and he's going to win it comfortably.
More on Tro-Bro Léon later on. And finally, we learnt that the Giro is not quite as one-sided as many people predicted. 3 stages in, and Tadej Pogačar has only won one stage. That said, he tried to win all 3 and came reasonably close. On Saturday, UAE Team Emirates had to work almost immediately after a 5-man move went up the road, and they set a ferocious pace at the final categorised climb of the day, the Madalena. So ferocious that by the top, Pogačar only had one teammate left with him, Rafa Majka, which put them in a bit of a precarious position. Majka was forced to do all the controlling between there and the uncategorised climb to San Vito, which would be where the race was won and lost. Sensing an opportunity, the likes of Nicola Conci, Damiano Caruso and Max Schachmann all launched themselves up the road and had a decent sized gap by the time the GC favourites hit the foot of the climb. Pogačar attacked pretty close to the foot of it and immediately gapped everyone, except Narvaez and Alaphilippe. But whilst the Frenchman dropped off the pace, Narvaez glued himself to Pogačar's back wheel, and it felt like he didn't let it have more than a millimetre's gap the whole way up the climb. With teammate Thomas behind, Narvaez had the perfect excuse not to pull through, and even though Schachmann caught them on a descent to the finish, Narvaez was more than fast enough to finish off the job. Schachmann had to settle for second and a frustrated Pogačar third. The big surprise that day, as is often the case in Grand Tours, was in who was off the back rather than who was off the front. Rowe, who'd shown great form on the lead into the Giro, was distanced before they even got to the final climb of the day, conceding a minute by the finish, whilst Timo Rensman, 6th overall at the race last year, fared even worse. He'd lost 2.5 minutes after just one stage, and lost a further minute and a half the day after. Anyway, conclusions after stage 1, Pogačar isn't unbeatable, and there are some questions over the strength of his team too. Some of which were answered 24 hours later on stage 2. In the rise in pink, Ineos decided to defend the jersey and set tempo behind the day's break, which seemed a bit bizarre since Narvaez had little chance of sticking with the best climbers on the first summit finish of the race. And keeping the breakaway close meant the finish line bonus seconds would be there for Pogačar to take, which is exactly what happened, albeit with a little bit of strife along the way for Pogačar. A puncture on the lead into the climb wasn't part of the plan, no matter how many theories there were about the team trying to replicate Pantani's exploits on that same climb 25 years ago. To make matters worse, Pogačar had a slow speed crash. His team asked him to stop after the corner, but as he rounded it, a spurt of sealant came out, and as his tire rolled over it, he slipped out. The flailing of arms was much because of the embarrassment of it as if anything else had happened, I'd have thought. Novak and Grosjean brought him back without too much trouble, and then along with Berg set a searing pace at the front of the race. The last man standing from the early break, Piccolo of EF, was caught soon after, and it wasn't long before we saw the telltale sign of a few words exchanged between Pogačar and Majka. Sure enough, a few moments later, Majka lit it up, and then Pogačar set off like a jack-in-the-box. Initially, O'Connor and Thomas both followed, but whilst Thomas soon realised he needed to go at his own pace, O'Connor persisted, to his own detriment, as it turned out. He paid dearly for that effort further up the climb, finishing the day in 13th place at a minute behind. Man of the match that day, though, was Florian Lipowicz. His teammate at Bora Hansgrohe, Danny Martinez, had suffered a mechanical on the climb that he had to claw his way back from. Once he did, Lipowicz set to work on the front and actually reduced the gap to Pogačar from there to the line. It was another incredible display of strength from Lipowicz, who'd already turned a few heads at the Tour de Romandie a week earlier. He was so strong on the day that only 3 riders were able to get round him. Martinez himself, who took second, Geraint Thomas, who took third, and Lorenzo Fortunato. They all came in just under half a minute behind Pogačar, whilst finishing 3 seconds further back was still enough for Kian Uijtdebroeks to move into 4th overall and the best young rider's jersey. On stage 3, and what was initially one of the most boring stages in Giro history turned out to be thoroughly entertaining. There was no attacks for the first third of the stage, and then it all kicked off at the first intermediate sprint of the day. With no breakout front, it was the sprinters vying for the Ciclamino jersey who went for the points, as you'd expect. But it was what happened after that sprint that set the race alight. Realising that there was a big gap behind them, the group pressed on, and it was quite the group. Merlier, Coy, Groves, Milan, Ewan, Danese and Laporte amongst others. Whilst most major teams represented and no GC threats in there, the few sprinter teams who missed out suddenly had a very hard job on their hands. Movistar, Polti Cometa and Bayern Victorious set to work, but it was a long, hard chase and one that split the peloton in pieces at one point. It did eventually all come back together, but not without a big fight, and so we waited for the finale, which was one we expected to be contested by the sprinters, albeit that they'd have to work hard for. A 1.5 kilometre climb that crested with 3 kilometres to go put their legs to the test. Mikel Honore tried his luck, and Pogačar went with him. He took a glance before he made his decision, and his decision was obviously to go with that attack, which forced the hand of Geraint Thomas, and suddenly we had two of the GC favourites off the front on a day that was expected to be for the sprinters. It was, in the end, but my word, did they have to fight for it. As such, there was no real lead out by the finish. All those riders had been used up in the chase, but coming out on top in all the chaos was Tim Merlier, as has so often been the case in the sprints this season. That was his 8th win of the year, but believe it or not, his first at a Grand Tour since 2021 Tour de France. That's in part because he wasn't selected for any of them by Soudal Quickstep last year. Milan finished a very close second. Anyway, this is how the GC looks after 3 days. Pogačar with a 46-second advantage over Thomas. Martinez 1 second behind that. Roubier and Uccibrooks in 4th and 5th. Uccibrooks leads the Young Riders classification 44 seconds in front of Alex Baudin of Decathlon. Whilst Merlier leads the points, Milan actually has the same number of points, but Merlier gets the jersey because of his stage win. Pogačar also has the best climber's jersey too. Probably the most controversial part of the 3 days was the colour of Pogačar's shorts though. They pretty much blew the internet up. I can sort of see why. They were completely the wrong shade of pink, let's be honest. In fact, they were almost identical to the colour of the Ciclamino jersey worn by Fiorelli on the day. Not his fault, as it was part of the skin suit given to him by the race organisation. Not sure why they didn't make them the same shade as the jersey, or even better, black. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Hot or not? The Giro will of course continue this week with 6 further stages, taking them into the first rest day. You'll be able to watch every kilometre of every stage on Discovery Plus and Max, as well as the Tour of Hungary, which Peter Sagan makes a temporary return to road racing. That could be interesting. Just before I move on though, a reminder that we have a brand new collection of jerseys and sweatshirts over at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com to celebrate the first men's Grand Tour of the year. There are a whole host of different designs to choose from, not far off, one for every stage actually. We've also got a special edition GCN Camelback water bottle on the shop too, which has proven particularly popular. And also put a link to the shop in the description below so you can head straight there to take a look. Right, on to the Vuelta Femenina now, which concluded on Sunday after 8 days of brilliant racing. The opening team time trial was followed by an opening row stage with the most popular of winners, Alison Jackson. She doesn't win a lot of races, but when she does, she wins big. Out-sprinting Blanca Vas at the end of a tough day in the saddle, that was Jackson's first win in a Grand Tour and her first since the Canadian national champs last summer. The first opportunity for the pure sprinters came a day later on a stage to Teruel. Miria Benito of AG Insurance Soudal was away on her own for 100 of the 130km stage, much of it into a stiff headwind. That can't have been much fun. Charlotte Kool was probably the favourite to win that day in the absence of Lorena Wiebes, but we were once again taught not to underestimate Marianne Vos on her terrain. Her win in the end was a comfortable one and was again on stage 7 where she sprinted so hard that she finished 2 seconds ahead of second placed Christian Faulkner. Faulkner herself had success earlier in the race. She attacked with just under 6 kilometres to go on stage 4 to Zaragoza. Once she goes, she's so hard to pull back. Faulkner crossed the line with 10 seconds to spare over Georgia Baker in second place on a day that had seen crosswinds rip the bunch to pieces. Giganta, Garcia, Rielani were the big real losers on the GC that day, and the Italian actually had to abandon the race ahead of the following stage, suffering the after effects of a crash. That day saw Marianne Vos unseat Blanca Vas as the race leader, but it'd be all changed 24 hours later on the way to Jaca, the first summit finish of the race. Vollering lined things out with 2.5 kilometres to go, and one by one the riders behind were distanced. Eventually only Cassiolina and Longo Borghini remained, but even they succumbed to the pace with 800 metres to go, leaving Vollering to take a solo win on the day. Her first win of the year, believe it or not, and one that propelled her into the leader's jersey. A jersey that she and her team defended right through to the end and in the best possible style. Evita Music got the better of her on stage 6, another very popular win, but on the 8th and final stage, Vollering was back to her winning ways. She attacked with 6.5 kilometres to go, soon finding herself solo and en route to her second and third wins of the season, the stage and the GC. There was a large margin of victory for the Dutch champion on that GC, almost 2 minutes over Rihanna Marcus of Visma Lease bike, with Longo Borghini third. Vollering also won the mountains competition and her team the teams, but it was Vos who took the points jersey. I'll move on to Tro-Bro Léon now. With its 29 sectors of farm roads, this race has become a bit of a cult classic over the years, and it's a very hard one to win. As mentioned at the top of the show, it marked the 17th one-day race win for Arnaud Delis, who had to overcome 2 punctures during the day. Third last year, Delis said he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice, and fairly comfortably outsprinted Clement Venturini and Pierre Gauthier. Meanwhile, at the Elfstedenronde Brugge, Alexander Kristoff was busy winding back the clock. The Norwegian hadn't won for almost a year, but picked up the 89th win of his career on Sunday ahead of Van der Paar and Barbier. In other news, there have been a couple of retirement announcements over the past week. Luke Rowe used his podcast, What's Occurring, to make the news public. The Welshman crashed at E3 in March and has been suffering from concussion ever since. Whilst he still has another year left on his Ineos contract, he said that he made the decision after a consultation with a specialist, saying he'd rather be safe than sorry. The other rider to make the same decision for different reasons is Rick Zabel. He'll ride his last professional race at the Rundum Köln in a few weeks' time, after just over 10 years as a pro rider. He will be replaced on Israel Premier Tech with immediate effect by Joe Blackmore. That'll please Dan. It was only a week or two ago that he was saying how surprised he was that Blackmore wasn't going straight into their World Tour team. The Tour of Scandinavia has unfortunately been cancelled this year due to lack of funding. The race has been due to take place from August 29th to the 1st of September, but has been vowed to be back in 2025. And you can read more on that story over on our website. And just finally, Marianne Zeeman just last week said he was confident that Vinegar will be at the Tour de France this year. There weren't really any more details of the Dane's recovery, but hopefully that's a good sign. Right, that's all for this week. Apologies it's a day late, but we had another bank holiday here in the UK yesterday. And yes, it rains the whole day. We'll be back next Monday to wrap up the first week of the Giro. We'll see you then.